Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now we're on location at Upnor Castle, right down in the Medway in Kent, the Garden of England, where it's another castle, but this isn't the kind of castle that you'd think. There aren't any massive towers and battlements because this is something totally different. It's an Elizabethan gunnery fortress built between 1559 and 1567 on the orders of good Queen Bess, God bless her. Now, the engineer was Sir Richard Lee. He was the most experienced military engineer of his day. And what it was they built the gunnery fortress to protect the new Chatham Dockyards, where they were starting to build the ships for the English Navy, for the Royal Navy. It's quite a place. So we're going to have a look how the castle grew, what its job was, and what its final battle that took place here, because it's quite an incredible history. But if you look at the battlements there, it's quite unusual, isn't it? Are you coming, pussycat? Are you coming to have a look at the castle? You're going to catch mice for us? If you saw my video on Rochester Castle, now Rochester Castle is across the Medway River in Rochester there. It's a ruin, and much of the stone that was removed and quarried from the castle itself and the buildings around, voila, here it is, Upnor Castle. Pretty much built out of Rochester Castle, except for the brickwork. Now, you can see the top of the battlements there. You have those sharpened stakes, because what they learned was the enemy could land troops. You could be attacked from the landward side. Also, in the English Civil War, they built up the bastions around, so this is not just defending the river, it can defend itself from outside. But without further ado, let's explore. So it's interesting what you look at and then what you can't see. There's a chunk missing. So dig the ditch out an awful lot deeper and then put a drawbridge on here. But that's long gone. But although this gatehouse was a later addition, what I do like are the doors. Although these are replicas of the originals, they're quite lovely. So, if you've seen any of my other videos, especially Chepstow, I love castle doors. And here we have a fabulous pair. The wicket gate, so the doors are locked for most of the day and you come in and out of this smaller door. But to match it, they've made the pattern, which is lovely. A couple of musket loops here, so anybody who's charging down, bang, typical from the English Civil War these. But now, here we go. This is a gun port that looks along the ditch. But it's medieval. These are a couple of quatrefoils that are taken from Rochester Castle. And I love it because we've suddenly gone back into the medieval times. Come round to this one. You've got a wooden lintel and then you've got brickwork. And there's an interesting thing with the brickwork in these places. If you look at these bricks, these ones, an easy way for me is these are just about 3 fingers. These are Tudor. Now, if I take you over here, Tudor bricks. We'll have a look as we go through, see if we can find some younger bricks, because it's fascinating. But there is a mark down here. This is what we used to call the crow's foot. And it's the Board of Ordnance mark, the arrowhead, and then the slash across the top. It was Henry VIII's time that started the arrowhead. Royal property belongs to the king, or in this case, belongs to the queen. Right, let's go inside and have a look, shall we? There's an interesting thing. You close the door, so you've got a couple of musket loops, but you've also got the view here. So you can look who's coming down. Knock, knock, knock. Who is it? It's the king. No, it ain't. Go away. So they're great. Look at the thickness of them. And studied together. Oh, hello, puss. It's the castle cat. But have a look at this. An original inglenook fireplace. You imagine here with the other soldiers on guard. There's a fire there burning away. The chimney's still open. You're in the inglenook Your mate sat here, the cat's come over to say, hello, puss, and you're smoking your pipes. This is the real history, isn't it? It's the common history. You've got no knights in armour here. Just ordinary soldiers, guards, and folks going about their daily business. If you take your time to look around at this fireplace, you'll see there are some beams missing, and there are a couple of recesses, little cubby holes. It makes you wonder what they were used for. But if you look at the fireplace as a whole, it looks more like a kitchen than just a fireplace. And that's quite interesting because this is not the original fireplace. It was added at the very end of the 17th century. That's when this becomes more of a living accommodation and barracks as opposed to just a gatehouse. As you come up the stairs, you can see they're made of wood. It's not a stone staircase. And the central spindle here appears to be one continuous piece of wood. I've had a look and I couldn't find a join. So that begs the question, where's it from? Could it be the heart of an oak tree? Or perhaps they found a use for a ship's mast. Ships would have been stripped down and reused at the dockyards. As you come into here, this first floor room has a simple fireplace which links to the fireplace downstairs. But the room itself is empty. There's not much to see until you look close. There is evidence of where the workings for the drawbridge once were. So this empty room back in the Tudor times would have been full of ropes and pulleys for raising and lowering the drawbridge. Now let's have a look outside. So as you come out of the gatehouse, you're into the courtyard. This is the original gunnery fortress. This is the 1559 Elizabethan fortress. And the problem with it was vulnerable from the land side. So between 1599 and 1601, the gatehouse is built and then the curtain walls. But the way you see them at the moment, there's a little bit missing. Interestingly, it doesn't show you a walkway. Now, I'm not sure what used to be on the top, because that's been changed quite dramatically. I reckon it would have been castellation, yeah, crenellation like you have. But the platform's missing. But here, it tells us that there was a building here. We know it went up at least as high as here. You've got put lugs. So what did they support? They must have supported the upper walkway for the battlements. So you have to look out for the little signs, don't you? All the put lug signs where all of this went. And then there's a little quirky bit at the end. And you know, you like to ask the questions, what's this for? Where did that go? But sometimes you just don't know. Let's have a look. Are you coming, pussy? Is it a drain? So all of the filth and the garbage is washed out down there into the ditch, but you've got to watch out because you never know, the enemy, they might come up that pipe. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think this is a main drain, and there's another one further down on the other corner. And I want to show you, before we go into the actual fortress, I want to show you a gun, a real gun. As you come round the corner, is a pair of guns. You have to blame Henry VIII really for these heavy guns and the gun carriages, the Mary Rose. But these, 1859, were some of the last smoothbore cannons ever cast. But it's just the gun carriage. Just look at it. Now, I was reading that some of these have got a range of 1.5 miles. But they're not designed for that. These are designed to give a broadside. Enemy ships coming past, they're going to be blasted by these cannons, these guns. And in fact, that's indeed what did happen 1667, but that's a whole different story, which we're going to go into later on. Just at the moment though, look at these guns. Wow. So here we have the oldest part of the fortress. This is your Elizabethan gunnery fortress, Windows at the lower part have been bricked up. This was converted later on, but you still have your mullion windows from the original times at the top. But there's an interesting little feature just here. There used to be a carved slab here with Elizabeth I's coat of arms, but it's all since been taken away. Let's have a look inside, shall we? Are you coming, Puss? Been following us round from the very beginning. After 1667, there were more gunnery fortresses and emplacements built between here and the mouth of the river when it goes into the Thames. That was to give fire to enemy ships coming down. And Upnor Castle became kind of redundant. So they turned it into a magazine for gunpowder. So this was cleared out, all of the old Tudor rooms were all got rid of, and it was filled with gunpowder. These barrels, 100 pounds of gunpowder in each one, went from floor to ceiling. And this is how it actually carried on being useful right the way up into the Victorian times. But I've just spotted something that I want to show you. This isn't the original roof. This has all been changed. But have a look at the marks, showing you where the joints go. I love this kind of stuff. So we have the carpenter's marks, 8 in Roman numerals. Then we have 7, 6, 5, turn around, 4, 3, 2, 1. Isn't that great? But when this was a gunnery fortress, there were guns on the roof. This is quite a place. It's a little bit of a gem that's tucked away in the countryside of the Medway in Kent. You look at the size of these beams. These are oak trees. It's incredible. And of course, because it changed over the years, its usage, if you're going to be hauling gunpowder up and down, it's got to be done properly. So you have a capstan here. So they put a rope around a barrel, they can lower it down. And there's just an extra little piece here if you want to come over here. So don't forget, this place would have been filled with gunpowder in the later years. It's a magazine, right? So felt shoes on the workers. And you'll see this is a wooden floor. And all your weathering on the outside of the shutters and that and the window frames, it was all copper sheeting. I should imagine that's been taken off ships that have been beached and scrapped. So this is it. It's weatherproof, but it doesn't spark. Like the idea of felt shoes, no studs, wooden floor. The last thing you need is something to spark. Kind of blows your mind, doesn't it? Well, it would have done if there'd have been a spark. So even though we're just inside one of the corner towers of the main building, this is now a window. But it would have been a gun port, a swivel gun here. So any ships coming in, full of die shot, boom, away it goes. You know, this is incredible because it gives you a cross section of the floor. Right, all of the cross beams, the central beams going through. But the floor down below, it's even heavier. It's block paving in its rawest form. Everything to prevent sparks. But this is all later history. Let's go back into the Tudor times. Let's go outside, out the front. Here's the block floor, as you can see. They can cut off and then hammered in, kept together. Hard wearing, but safe. So we're on the river side of the castle, the water bastion, which is literally the teeth of the gunnery fortress. But if you look at the fort behind us, if you look up at the dripstone, that line there, the building above it is the 2-storey gunnery fort that you actually enter from the courtyard. You look at those round windows, those were for heavy guns to fire from inside the gunnery fortress. But they also had heavy guns mounted on the roof. Now the roof must have been heavily reinforced for those enormous guns to not just stand there, but being able to fire as well. Now behind this wall and these locked doors, there are passageways and tunnels that I'd love to be able to show you, but unfortunately today the doors are locked, so we can't. But what I can tell you is that these tunnels, passageways and rooms were used to store gunpowder that was substandard. Maybe in shipment it had come separated and it was awaiting transportation to the gunpowder mills to be reground and then reissued. These are Tudor doorways. Or is this a medieval lintel taken from Rochester Castle? But there's 4 of them all the way along. And also here, oh sorry, this has got to be a Rochester Castle window. Just look at that. There's a strange thing. It appears to be a fireplace, or what used to be a fireplace here. What's a fireplace doing on the outside of a castle wall? Well, have a look. You can still trace where another building was added. You have corbels here which supported a roof. So there was a later addition that covered the front. Accommodation, stores ready for use. But if you look at this whole thing, so you've got gun ports going all the way through the different floors, then on the top a massive gunnery fortress, plus the towers on each side, and then here you have the bastion. They knew that because of the fledgling Royal Navy, need for new ships, for guns, Rochester was going to be really important. Chatham Dockyards. And I asked the question, why Chatham? Because you had Portsmouth, you had all of that down there, and they said, well, it's quite simple really. Chatham is closer to London, so people can get to and from, and they can see their investments and see how the Navy's going. So this fortress is here to protect the Chatham Dockyards, which are just over yonder. And they became enormous. But in the Tudor times, it's the beginning, and then 1667, they were vital. This whole estuary going all the way up would have been filled with all of those absolute incredible 3-masted gunnery ships, all up and down, together with smaller boats too. And then you have this water bastion, bristling with guns, loaded with ammunition, and well staffed. It would have been formidable. That is, if it was loaded with plenty of ammunition and plenty of soldiers. But in truth, that wasn't the case. So 1667, it's after the Civil War, after Oliver Cromwell's time there, the Commonwealth. We have Charles II on the throne, the merry monarch, who was skint. He was short of money. He would spend a lot of money on revenge for the regicides, those who signed the death warrant of Charles I. And of course his lavish court. The last thing he wanted to do was spend money on an army and on a fort. He believed that the Dutch, although they were standing off, were going to do nothing. It was just a show of force. There was an unofficial truce. But before that truce, the English had been really naughty. They'd attacked a Dutch merchant fleet. So the Dutch now, if they're going to get a really good truce, they want to do it from a position of strength. So attack the Royal Navy dockyards and burn them to the ground. That's the intention of the Dutch. But of course, they've got to get past Upnor first. The pinnacle of the history for this fortress has to be the 5th of June 1667, when the Dutch Navy, 80 ships, were at the far end out on the River Thames there. They were commanded by Admiral Michiel de Ruyter. I hope for my Dutch fans that I got that from the Netherlands there correct. But they weren't sure of the waterways up there. They'd gone up to Gravesend, caused a bit of damage, but couldn't get any further. And they're now going to come back and they're going to venture down to the Medway. Their plan is to land troops, destroy fortifications, attack ships, burn them, sink them, and capture what they can as a prize. The problem the English had is they hadn't been paying their men. It's a disgrace in our history. You had gunners, you had sailors aplenty, but some of them hadn't been paid for the best part of 2 years. So I'll ask you a question. If you hadn't been paid for 2 years and your arrears were nowhere in sight, would you load a musket and go and fight an enemy who is trying to capture the ships that belong to your employer who hasn't paid you for 2 years? And when that employer turns around to you and says, oh, come on, let's fight. I'll pay you next week, next month. Would you stand and fight? That's one of the problems the English had. The other problem they had was those Dutch sailors. They were brilliant. I am certain they must have had some English mercenaries aboard who showed them the waterways, because it didn't seem what the English did. The Dutch will get through it. That is until they reach Upnor Castle, Upnor gunnery fortress. So it was on the 5th of June that the Dutch fleet were at the entrance to the River Medway. But by the 10th of June, they'd come upriver and they destroyed the new fort and part-built dockyards at Sheerness. But on the 11th of June, the Duke of Albemarle, he's been sent here. He's brought guns from the Tower of London. He's going to reinforce the whole lot. 50 guns across the river. Layer upon layer of guns here, but they're short of ammunition. They're short of men. Now, stopping the Dutch fleet is just across the River Medway at Gillingham is a massive iron chain. It's enormous and it's on pontoons. It's just above the surface of the river. There are guard ships and there are gun batteries each side. The Dutch are halted here. So on the 12th of June, the next day, Captain Jan van Brekel, a brave Dutch captain, his ship is a 40 gunner. He tries to break through the chain, but he's under fire from both sides. He can't break the chain, but with him, he has fire ships that can be sent into enemy ships or dockyards and then set on fire. He has several of those. They're all pushing together against this chain that's on these pontoons. He is stopped, and then one of the fire ships breaks through. The Dutch now are free to come upriver towards Chatham Dockyard. On the way, they capture the royal flagship, the Royal Charles. They also burn other vessels and drive other vessels onto the shallows. They are now coming towards Upnor Castle and Chatham Dockyard. But they realise that there's going to be a fight here. So they anchor downriver, and for the evening they have a rest. The battle is really going to hot up the next day. So it was the next day, midday. The Dutch resume their attack, but they can't bring their capital ships, these big ships, down the Medway, because they're afraid that if one of them gets hit, burns or blocks, they can't retreat. So they send their smaller ships, their smaller vessels, together with pontoons and soldiers, because the soldiers are going to attack the forts, which is great, except for one little thing at Upnor here. If you look just over here, you will see there's a palisade. You can't get to the fortresses. Now, the combined gunfire from Upnor Fortress and the batteries on the other side, 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe 100 guns. The Dutch here falter. So De Ruyter, their admiral, together with his senior officers, imagine this, these are brave men, now row down the river, or I should imagine they were rowed, they are admirals, and they come down the river, encouraging their men, push on, push on. But the fire from these two bastions here, the fortress and then across the river, was too much. They pulled back. The Dutch attack on Chatham Dockyard has failed. They will now turn around and they will retire. But while they were down here, they managed to set fire to the Royal London, the Royal Oak, the Royal James, capital ships for the British or the English Navy in those days. And they took with them the flagship, the Royal Charles. And there's a twist in the tale there. When they got it back to Holland, it was too deep a draft to be used on their waters, so it was eventually scrapped. But the back of it, the royal coat of arms, apparently is in a museum in Amsterdam. Hey, history, but there's a lesson to be learned here. The Dutch were prepared. They knew what they were doing. They were going to negotiate from a position of strength, which indeed they did. The English had neglected their armed forces, failed to pay their men what was due, and the arms and ammunition was rubbish. So in some of the attacks, soldiers and sailors simply put down their guns and walked away. Interesting, eh? Either side of the actual gunnery fortress, you have flanking towers. And this is the south tower. We're going to have a look inside. Spark-proof, all of this. Either lead or copper on every door as you go through. Now, even though this has been converted into a barracks for the magazine later on, it still retains some of its former glory as a gunnery fortress. You have a gun port here going along the outside of the ditch. And here you have quite a wonderful little room. No house should be without one. It is, of course, the garderobe. No house is complete without its own flushing garderobe. Well, actually, this isn't flushing, it goes straight down into the river, but hey. So, it's great to see one that's been preserved. And then we're going to go upstairs. Let's have a look, see what's on top of the tower. Whoa, yeah, this is quite interesting. You've got a gun loop here for a handgun, looking down into the water bastion. So you've got every angle covered. So if they did manage to get over into the bastion, you can shoot them down from here. Amazing. Just checking. Yeah, Tudor bricks. So this is all from the 18th, 19th century, the way it's been converted for the magazine. But there is a doorway here that would have led to the battlements going along. So it's one of our only chances to view the battlement. So you can actually see the battlements were higher. You look here, there is something missing. So you've got to assume there was crenellation along here. But these defensive spikes, quite something. I'd hate to try and assault this place. You'd be cut to ribbons. So there you have it, Upnor Castle. From its beginnings in 1559 as a gun fort protecting Elizabethan warships on the Medway, to its final use as a munitions store, it stood watch over the Chatham Dockyards for centuries. It saw off those Dutch raiders in 1667, and while it largely became obsolete as a fortress after that, it continued to serve as a magazine and ordnance facility right up until the end of the Second World War, when it finally closed in 1945 and became the museum that you see to this day. Today, its weathered walls are pretty much silent, but they still echo with the thunder of cannon and footsteps of the soldiers who once defended it. It might not have the fame of Dover or the drama of Rochester Castle, which is just up the road, but don't let that fool you. Upnor is a hidden gem, tucked away, full of character and charm. So if you're ever in this part of Kent, take a detour down to the river and let Upnor Castle surprise you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that tour of ours of Upnor Castle. If you did, like, share and subscribe. Now, we've been escorted all the way through by our latest Patreon member, the Castle Cat. He hasn't left our side. What a lovely little cat he is. And he is the Castle Cat. Now, if you'd like to support our channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? The link is in the description. Now, quick shout out to some of our Patreon members. We have Craig Newman, Dee Dee Lawton, and Zachary McMickens. Hey guys, thanks a million. Bye for now.